Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Set it up.
All right. We'll start with faculty announcements. Yeah.
This isn't appropriate because it's Ian's senior defeat, but as most of you know, we do a trip to Wall Street every year. This year it's going to be Monday, March 19th, which is the last day of spring break. So if you're interested in going, please see me afterwards so I can get your name and I can send out to you all the information via email after this.
That's sometimes order food and coffee. I said, do not put your backpack in the sitting area of the movie center. There's a reason behind it. It's a sitting area. It is not a backpack storing area. Today we had at least 30 backpacks there. It's really disturbing. And what I'm going to do, and you didn't do this before, I can't be there every 2 seconds to say, don't put your backpacks in. I'm going to get as I've done the other day, big trash can, put your backpack in that trash can. And you're going into my office, I'm locking my office, and you're getting a book bag back with attention. That's simple. Okay. All right. Any other faculty announcements? Students? No.
The month of February is coming up. That means that Valentine's Day is as well. And just wanted to announce that Family Men, as always, are going to be concerned. They're one third eggs for $2. One third eggs for $3, $2 for $5. And we will be visiting our PTS tomorrow here at the DC as always. So find any of us, myself, Nick out, or any other member of the Family Men to request that.
Yeah.
What most teachers is on sale the MX 31 tomorrow?
Another hand back there. Any other students? All right. I have 2 quick things. One, coming up on Friday, we have Storm the Ice and Spotlight Night. We'll have a Spirit Assembly talking more about that. And then next Friday is Silent Night. We'll talk about that on Friday as well. So just keep that on your radar coming up. And then second, the clothing drive is actually going really well. We have, I don't know if you see it, there's 2 pretty big things that are almost all the way full. So tomorrow is the last day to bring stuff in for that, at least to determine the dress down. So we're on a good pace to do so, but one final push would be great. Anything else? We're good? All right, let's go on.
My pleasure to introduce Mr. Ian Shaw, course speech.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
I hear you loud and clear, Brother Charles.
Great. In our time right now, high school students across the country are being forced to study more, do more extracurriculars, more homework, play better in sports, and ultimately compete for a spot in college. This constant push into doing more, and doing more faster, is made even worse by technology. On top of that, Gilman is one of the top high schools in the country, which only exacerbates this even further. A lot of what students are being told to do is for the sake of college admissions, to give a student a more compelling application. We have been convinced that these are things that we not only should do, but that we must do. Yes, truthfully, these things may offer a better chance of college admission, but there's one key flaw to all of it. What is the purpose of doing something that is totally meaningless to you? Oftentimes, school rewards conformity, but life does not. Some of the most influential people in the world are those who dare to think for themselves and have the courage and confidence to act on it. As it relates to Gilman, it is incredibly important to understand that you can still achieve without conforming. Last year, like many students do, I became extremely tired of doing my homework each night. I questioned why it was so crucial to my success in school that I spend hours at home, not in school, doing more work for classes that centered on things that were for the most part not particularly intriguing to me. That evening last year, I was doing homework and began to wonder where I had gone wrong, when I had become so concerned with things that in my mind were completely arbitrary. I started to envy the person I was in elementary and middle school. I remember the time in the 3rd grade at the Catholic elementary school I went to when I lied to a priest, telling him that I was Jewish in order to get out of First Communion. This was because I could not understand how a piece of bread was Jesus, and why, if that piece of bread was Jesus, you would want to eat him. Yet, 8 years later, I could not even persuade myself to abandon schoolwork when it made even less sense to me than religion did as a 3rd grader. From experiences that I had long forgotten, I realized how easy it is to forget who you are and what you want to be in the confusion of everyday life. So I decided to do something completely different. I stopped doing my homework any time after school hours ended. This meant I had time to do things that were truly interesting to me, like pursuing a business idea. The business idea and the things I learned from my experiences ended up being the most crucial things I learned throughout high school. For instance, I learned what it meant to take risks, even when people around you are completely against it. While skateboarding through the city to a business pitch, I came across a very steep hill, and as I passed an old couple walking by, I hopped off the skateboard to walk down the hill. The man immediately interrupted me and said, "I really thought you were going to bomb it. Might as well break your bones while they will still heal." I still didn't ride down that hill because I would have died, but the message was pretty important. My parents have never been overbearing with school, and my academic performance has really been up to me, especially because neither of them can figure out how to check my grades online. Furthermore, because my father went to community college after failing out of high school, what I did in an effort to go to college was never something that anyone really spoke to me about. But when applying to college, my mom instructed me not to apply to my top choice because it was not worth the $75 application fee. Almost reflexively, I disregarded what she had said, and I ended up stealing her credit card that night to apply to the college that I am now enrolled in for next year. In retrospect, everyone was proud that I took a risk after it was successful. But even after people yell at me when things fail, the risks that I took defined my life according to how I wanted my life to unfold. Much like what I mentioned before, what you are taking risks for must have a purpose, or else it will be reduced to recklessness. Throughout my time at Gilman, my advisory has sat in the very front row, until we managed to convince Mr. Furlong to move us back a few seats this year. Over time, I began to listen more carefully to the things our administrators regularly tell us. The foremost message concentrates on something along the lines of "be Gilman" in one form or another. This struck me as blatantly contradictory to the other times in which students are told to be themselves. For what if who you are is frankly not Gilman enough? But even more confusing was trying to grasp what it meant to even be Gilman. The most obvious answer is the Gilman 5, but the pessimist in me refused to accept the 5 words taped and painted to the inside walls of our school as somehow representative of what Gilman was meant to inspire us to become. Regardless of my disbelief, I have encountered what I now know to be Gilman through experiences that have formed my understanding of this school and are the foundation of understanding my own sense of morality. The first story I would like to emphasize took place about a year ago. I was sitting outside around a table with some of my friends when one of them opened a pack of cigarettes and began to smoke one. I did not immediately think very much of it, considering the person was over 18. However, Michael Fisher thought otherwise. He stood up while the 5 others watched as he took the box of cigarettes from his hand and threw them on the ground, proceeding to stomp them into pieces with his shoe. And like the first-class citizen that Mr. Smythe tells us to be, he picked up the pieces of broken cigarettes and threw them in the trash. The second story came while returning from a party late on a Saturday night with Will Davis. We passed by a figure on the side of the road, and as we began to approach closer, we realized it was a person face down on the side of the street. We went to see if the person was alive or had been hit by a car and saw that it was a Coward Hall student around our ages. We stood there for a moment trying to understand where the kid had come from and why he was stranded a few feet off the road asleep. Without hesitation, Will said to pick him up, and we brought him back to Will's house for the night, not saying a word to his parents. These stories are only 2 examples of the many that I have been exposed to during my time at Gilman. They exemplify moments that gave me pause days after they transpired. They are times in which a sense of brotherhood overcame any social pressure, and when compassion trumped rivalry and uncertainty. That is not to say that every Gilman student or alumnus acts synonymously. There are Gilman alumni who have made a fortune selling candy-flavored cigarettes to children in China, and others who have created the largest public benefit corporation in history right here in Baltimore. I would argue that a lot of what we learn in high school lectures and classrooms will ultimately be forgotten. But what we can choose to retain from the time we spend here can make all the difference. What we learn from our interactions with one another and the didactic lessons about the type of men we aspire to be are far more important than any curricula. In my life, I have taken many risks, many stupid, irresponsible risks as well, some of which have failed. The biggest risk I took was coming to Gilman, and I can proudly say that I will always try to be Gilman. Thank you.